What is the Agile methodology? The Agile methodology. First, you should know about the waterfall methodology. The waterfall and the Agile methodology are methods for developing software and testing software. So if you're going to be creating a new application, for example, that's a project, and it involves software. And when you develop the software and you test the software, usually you would want to follow certain steps for documentation purposes and ensuring the flow of the development is going well. And that's where the Agile methodology comes into play. Same thing with the waterfall methodology. And the Agile methodology is it's based on the waterfall methodology. And the difference between the waterfall methodology and the Agile methodology is pretty simple. Usually you would want to use the Agile methodology when the business you're working with / client doesn't have a concrete specifications for exactly what they want. They're not sure. That's where Agile methodology comes into play. Versus waterfall. Waterfall is when the client or the business knows what they want, how they want it to work. So if you're developing an application in waterfall, the client would know which languages are going to be used on the back end, which database management system on the data layer, which web development program they would be using for the presentation layer. Versus Agile, the client isn't sure yet, and it's all open up for you to pick or suggest. And the shortcomings of the waterfall methodology is that the waterfall methodology is slow because there's a lot of documentation. The majority of the time is spent in the planning phase. And with the waterfall methodology, you might have 1 or 2 releases on your software per year. Versus Agile methodology, you have constant releases every 2 to 4 weeks, and it's very fast. You can go back and make change things that you've done without any issues. Versus waterfall, you're falling down from a waterfall. You can't go back up because the water's pushing you down. And that's one of the shortcomings with waterfall methodology, is that it's hard to go back and change things that you've already done. And what's so great about the Agile methodology is that it encourages self-management in the team that's working on the project. And it's very rewarding to the team members working on the project, because you're getting constant feedback from the customer from the client slash business, because you're constantly releasing updates in short periods of time and you're getting feedback. And on top of that, the fact that you're able to do things and see results very quickly, it's very rewarding to the project team members. And that's why Agile method is preferred and is what you would normally see in the workplace environment. In these days versus before, you might see waterfall. And when you look at the picture in the background here, it says Agile methodology, and there's 6 steps in different colors: yellow, orange, red, purple, blue, green. Plan, design, develop, test, deploy, review. This is not actually unique to Agile because, like I said before, Agile is based on waterfall. It's just the approach is different. They both have the same basic steps, which is to plan, design, develop, test, deploy, and review. And the reason why I'm going over Agile methodology real quick is because in the next few videos I'm going to be creating a full stack environment which involves the data layer, business layer, and presentation layer for a MapleStory private server, which I'm just going to be using for learning purposes. But I'll go more into that later on in the other videos. But if we continue, if I was to go over each stage in the methodologies for Agile, you would start off with the planning phase. And the basic summary of the planning phase is that in this phase you gather the requirements of the software from the business slash client. And this is actually the most important phase. They're all important, but obviously gathering the requirements is needed for the next phases, and you need to do it right, because if you don't do it right, you might do something that wasn't even wanted from the business slash client, and then you would have to change and start all over and this and that. But what's so great about the Agile methodology is that because it's so dynamic and flexible, just constant releases, you get constant feedback. If you ever do something wrong, it's usually caught very early. And so, like I said, in the planning phase, you would get the requirements gathering. You would start off with business requirements. And in business requirements, you're basically asking, why are you developing this software? Well, why? Because the business needs a central location where its customers can log in. Let's say the business is a grocery store. The customers can log in, or maybe there's no login and the grocery store just, let's say there is a login. The grocery store is, what they want is they want the customer to be able to see the inventory at the grocery stores, so they can click the locations of each grocery store and click on items and see how much is in stock and what is available, and even order and reserve items. The purpose is for the customers to have easy access and quick information. And then next, after the business requirements, and in the business requirements phase, obviously you would have to write a business requirements document where you document what are the requirements of the business, as I've just explained. And then next you would move to the user requirements. In the user requirements, now we're asking what is it that the user slash customer of the grocery store wants. So first we started with the business requirements, the grocery store. Now we're going to the user requirements. What is it that the users want? The users want simplicity on the website, easy access. They want it to be, yeah, you know, everything needs to be in order. It needs to look nice. It needs to be fast. It needs to be simple, not overwhelming. And that's why in the user requirements, we're asking the who of the software, right? Who is using the software? Versus business requirements, we're asking the why. Why are we creating this software? After the user requirements, what we do is the last one is, so there's three in requirements gathering: business requirements, user requirements, and finally system requirements. In system requirements, we're asking the how. So how is it that we are going to do this, basically, from everything we've gathered in the business requirements, user requirements. And don't forget, the user requirements has its own document that you can include in the business requirements document, or have your own separate document, user requirement specifications document. In the systems requirements, yes, you ask the how of the software. How are we going to do all of this? What are we going to be using? Are we going to use Angular for the website? We're going to use JavaScript. We're going to use HTML, obviously, and this and that. And then you would have the user requirements specifications document, I think, for the last one. It's a software requirements specifications document. And that's in the planning phase, the way you get all this information is by creating user stories for the business. And the way the user stories are usually written is in the format of, as a customer, I want to be able to purchase products online. And from that, we are able to get the requirements. And from that, we would maybe do something like a feature, could be a drop-down selector using Angular that offers different payment options. But the better user story would be, as a customer, I want to be able to select the payment method so that I can choose the most convenient one. And from that, we're able to figure out who is the customer, and why. What they want is to be able to select a payment method, and why, so that they can choose the most convenient one. So if you're, going on a grocery website, you're trying to order groceries, as a customer, you want to be able to select the payment type, Visa, MasterCard, debit, so that you can have the most convenient one. And that's pretty much the summary of the planning phase. You're basically gathering requirements for the system, and you're also trying to figure out what is realistic. You know, normally what we do is we follow the um, Moscow prioritization technique. Um, Moscow, basically the M stands for must have, the S is should have, the C is could have, and the W is won't have / wish to have. And when you're developing software for a client / business, you have to figure out uh, quickly what must be there, what should be there, what could be there, and what shouldn't be there, because that basically sets up realistic expectations um, based on the time frame given to develop the software, if you even have the time and if it's even possible to do those things. In the design phase, so now we're moving from, if you look at the picture in the background, I basically summarized the planning phase in yellow, number one. If we move to the orange, which is second point, design, the design phase is all about figuring out how you're going to translate the requirements that you've gathered into something, you know, putting it together into something that will actually, well, you'll be able to develop in the third phase. And in the design phase, usually what we do is we have diagrams which we create to explain how things should work, how things interact in the system. Um, and for example, you could have a UC diagram, which shows how the customer interacts with the application, in turn with the business. And then you could have a UML class diagram to go into further detail about how each part of the system might interact with each other. If you're developing in Java or an object-oriented programming language, you might have certain classes of certain types. You might have interfaces, to basically define, let's say, a customer, and or maybe to define grocery items, and then you might expand on that with different classes which inherit, right? And that's what the design phase is about. There's all kinds of different diagrams. You have structural diagrams, uh, class, package, object, component, composite, structure, deployment. You have behavioral diagrams, activity diagram, sequence diagram, use case diagram, state diagram, communications, and this and that. And that's what the design phase is basically about. It's just about how you're going to be, how the system is going to interact, and what components of the system are needed to be defined for everything to work. And then that's when you move on to the third phase, development phase. And I'm going to basically be, if you understood what I was explaining about Agile methodology, with Agile methodology, you're not spending a lot of time in planning and design phases. You're not. That's the difference between the waterfall and agile, is that with agile you just start programming, you know, and um, you start incrementally uh, developing the software and releasing constant updates every 2 to 4 weeks and getting feedback. And that's how you're knowing if you're doing everything right, from the customer slash, well, I mean, slash the client slash business. And so development phase is very straightforward. You just develop uh, based on all the planning and design that you've already done, and it's very straightforward. Um, Normally, what I would always suggest is to use a version tracker when you're developing. So make sure you initialize your Git repo and you know, GitLab, GitHub, deploy, and that's where it's for deploying, obviously, which is the fifth phase. But develop, make sure you're using a version tracking system, and then if we move to the next phase, which is testing, make sure that, since you're going to be almost always using version tracker, like let's say you're deploying to GitLab and GitHub, make sure you have as you're developing, you're also creating the automated testing to ensure that everything works as expected. And usually what we do is for testing, the methods that we use is white box, gray box, and black box testing. And if I remember correctly, white box testing is when the programmer knows, or the tester, I guess, knows, exactly how the code is written, so they know what to expect. Versus gray box testing is when they know a little bit about the code and some stuff is hidden. And testing is when the tester doesn't know anything about um, how everything is written, or even how it works, the application, and then they just go and test and see if they can find anything. And yeah, you want to have continuous integration, so automated testing, and from there we move to the fifth phase, which is deploy. And in the fifth phase, we're just deploying. Usually, like I said, we should be using version trackers, and if you're using GitLab or GitHub, you would have a continuous deployment where when you're pushing your changes, it's going through automated testing and then automated deployment. And once you're done, all that, the last stage is review. Make sure that everything is going well, and that's about it for a basic summary of Agile. And if I could go ahead and explain why I'm going over Agile to begin with, it's because in my next few, the following, sorry, I got a hiccup. In the next following videos, I will probably be setting up a full stack environment, data layer, business layer, presentation layer for a V214 sortie based source, story private server, all for learning purposes. And yeah, next video I'm probably going to go over the different methods in Agile methodology, because Agile is composed of different methods like Scrum, Kanban, Scrumban, and etc. etc. So thank you for watching the video, and yeah.